Good morning, Ms. Health Mayor. Good morning, everybody.
Morning, Chair.
Yes.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, before we continue with the evidence of Ms. Nhantsi, I'd like, if I may,
Before you do
Yes.
that, I must just say that we were supposed to start at 10, but because of urgent matters that needed to be dealt with relating to today's proceedings, we were not able to do so. That is why we are starting now. Yes.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, before we continue with Ms. Nhantsi's evidence, I'd like to place on record certain facts in relation to the endeavours to communicate with implicated persons that were undertaken yesterday after your direction that those steps should be taken. Chair, the consequence of taking some of those steps is that contact was sought to be made with Mr. Mngadi, who was implicated in Ms. Nhantsi's evidence and was to be implicated in Mr. Mahlangu's evidence. Those efforts were made and no telephonic communication, spoken communication, was successful with Mr. Mngadi. But there was communication received from him this morning to our investigators who'd made the efforts yesterday to contact him. I'll move into what that communication indicates in a moment. But just to recap the position we were in yesterday. Yesterday's position, as I related to you, Chair, was that, at least in relation to Ms. Nhantsi's evidence, there had been Rule 33 notices sent to implicated persons, including Mr. Mngadi. The communication that was received from him this morning indicates that on his side, he disputes having received any of that notification prior to Ms. Nhantsi's evidence. Chair, the consequence of that is the need for further investigation, particularly on our side, to understand precisely what did happen when. But in a consequence in which there is communication from Mr. Mngadi in which he disputes having received any notification prior to the evidence at all, it is our proposal that we take steps to uncover what the factual state of affairs is and take all steps necessary to ensure that Mr. Mngadi receives copies of the relevant statements and affidavits, and in particular in relation to Mr. Mahlangu, that we stand down his evidence until we can report back to you on the status that has been established in relation to Mr. Mngadi.
No, that is fine. Let's proceed on that basis. The Commission will continue to do what it can to make sure that implicated persons are notified and that they get Rule 33 notices. But it doesn't mean that when we have done all that is reasonably required and we still can't, and somebody still disputes having received a notification, that we will never proceed. There will be circumstances where, if I'm satisfied that all that we are required to do has been done, I may give a go-ahead that we proceed. But in this particular case, I think it is in order that we defer Mr. Mahlangu's evidence until we know exactly what has happened or until further attempts have been made to ensure that Mr. Mngadi has received notice. I understand that all along the Commission was under, at least the evidence leaders were under the impression that he had received Rule 33 notices. But he has now indicated that he hasn't, and it's important to establish what the position is. So that will be in order. So Mr. Mahlangu's evidence will be deferred until you revert. Thank you.
We're indebted to you, Chair. Then just in terms of today's proceedings, our proposal is to conclude the evidence of Ms. Nhantsi and then to move to the next investigation area, actually.
Yes.
We're in the fortunate position that we had anticipated with some optimism, I expect, that we'd be able to get there today in any event. We have run longer in some of the witnesses, but we will our proposal is to just move seamlessly into that area of investigation with the two witnesses who will start off the second focus area.
That's in order.
Thank you, Chair. If we may then commence with the further questions for Ms. Nhantsi. Ms. Nhantsi, overnight you were requested to try and find the letters that you'd referred to, where you had followed up with BNP about their FSP license. You handed those to me this morning, is that correct?
Correct, Chair.
Thank you. I'd like to take an opportunity to hand them up, Chair, if I may.
Yes.
And provide you with a copy, Ms.
Yes,
Nhantsi, and then
thank
we'll
you.
go through them. Yeah, this is Chair, my proposal is that we add it at the end of Ms. Nhansi's bundle. If we were to do so, it would commence with the pagination 330. We can take steps over the break to paginate your file accordingly, if that is in order.
That's in order, but I think I've just paginated it.
Thank you. We're indebted to you.
That's
for that.
330 and 331, no?
And then there's a 332. You should have a
And
third
then
page.
332.
Yes. Ms. Nhantsi, if you'll just make those pagination notes as well, so we can be literally on the same page when we're dealing with it.
Not a problem, Chair.
So, Ms. Nhantsi, if we can just start there. You referred in your evidence yesterday to communication with BNP Capital on, I think it was the 13th of July, in which you raised a query about their statement at the time that they had previously alerted you to the suspension of their FSP license. Is that correct?
Correct, Chair.
And can you tell the Chair what this letter then contains?
Yes, certainly. Chair, yesterday I testified that when Ms. Fikelepi was doing the process in terms of engaging on the agreement, he sent on the 6th, we dealt with it yesterday on the email where she wanted
That was 6th of May, yeah?
6th of
July?
July.
6th of July.
July, okay.
Yes. She sent an email where she wanted BNP to confirm that the FSP license is in order. We need a copy and also a confirmation that it is in good standing. You recall, Chair, that yesterday we saw a FSP copy that was certified, dated 23rd of June. When we received queries, specifically the letter that came from Weber Wenzel, on the 13th, what we distributed today, Chair, is the letter that we wrote to BNP. Allow me to read it because you just circulated today, Chair.
Yes.
The letter is dated 13th of July 2016. Attention to the CEO, Mr. Daniel Mahlangu. It says, we note with concern your letters that confirms that at the time of SAA appointing BNP Capital to source funds on its behalf, you have received communication from FSB of its intention to suspend BNP's FSB license. As you are aware, the critical criteria of RFP included an FSB license. The subsequent confinement of sourcing of funds was based on BNP having successfully met the RFP criteria, particularly holding an FSB license. Furthermore, South African law requires a financial service provider to hold on an FSB license in order to provide authorized services. Holding such valid license is a material condition for the provision of the financial services to SAA. In the letter received from you via email by our acting CEO on the 11th of July 2016, you indicated that there was a communication sent to SAA on the 13th of May 2016 relating to the intention to suspend your FSB license. Please be advised that we do not have that correspondence, and could you kindly send it to us and also indicate the name of the person that you have sent the communication to. In the light of the above, SAA hereby gives you a notice to rectify the situation and provide us with a valid FSB license and confirmation of good standing from FSB by no later than Wednesday, the 20th of July, 2016, failing which your appointment, including the appointment to source funds on behalf of SAA, may be terminated.
Ms. Nhantsi, can I clarify that you did not then receive the confirmation that a prior communication had been sent on the 13th of May after this letter was sent?
Yes, Chair, I can confirm that we didn't receive any communication or any confirmation, as we have requested in the letter that they must give us that proof. They must even tell us who did they send the communication to. So we never received it, Chair.
So as you have the facts, that wasn't received on the 13th of May by SAA?
Yes, yes, Chair.
Thank you. Ms. Nhantsi, I'd then like to conclude on some aspects in relation to the cancellation fee. But before we get there, I wanted to just be clear on some of your evidence yesterday. One of the questions we probed was your knowledge of Mr. Mngadi's association with Nedbank, which you indicated you were aware of from early on. What I wasn't clear on in relation to your evidence is when precisely in time, to the extent that you know it, Ms. Myeni would have been aware that Mr. Mngadi was associated with BNP Capital. Whenabouts would that have occurred? And just to help you on the chronology, BNP Capital gets appointed as transaction advisor on the 20th of April.
Yes.
They are then appointed to source funds on the 25th of May. What I'm interested in, to the extent that you know it at all, is whether prior to or in that period, Ms. Myeni would have known that Mr. Mngadi was representing BNP Capital.
I don't know, Chair. I really don't know. I will really be speculating at this point in time.
There is one email communication, however, which you have provided us with.
Yes.
If we can find it in your file. Well, certainly the SMS, the WhatsApp communications refer to engagements that Mr. Mngadi is having with Ms. Myeni around the sourcing of funds.
Agree.
So at least at that point, and as I have it, those begin around the 31st of May, would you regard it as the case that Ms. Myeni would have known of his involvement then?
Yes, Chair, I would. I think the email that you're referring to, is it the one dated the 8th of June?
Yes, indeed.
Yes.
So that is an email to yourself and to Ms. Myeni from Mr. Mngadi, is that correct?
And acting CEO. Yes.
And the acting CEO. It's the four of you, and it relates to the sourcing of funds.
Agree.
Which at that stage was contracted to BNP.
Yes, Chair.
So would you be comfortable with the assertion that at least at those periods in time, end of May and continuing thereafter, Ms. Myeni would have been aware of his role in BNP?
Yes, I'll be comfortable, Chair.
But you don't know for a fact whether she was aware of that prior to that point?
I don't know, Chair.
And just for the record, I take it that when those decisions were made in relation to the extension of scope of the transaction advisor to source funds, and the board voted on that, Ms. Myeni didn't declare any conflict of interest in relation to that decision.
I don't recall any conflict of interest that Ms. Myeni declared in the meetings.
Thank you. If we may then just return to the conclusion of your evidence on the cancellation fee, Ms. Nhantsi.
Yes.
As I understand your evidence of yesterday, you regarded the cancellation fee as a scheme perpetrated by Ms. Myeni with the assistance of Mr. Mgadi to enrich themselves. Is that a correct reflection of your evidence?
It is, Chair. It is a correct reflection, especially knowing what I know now, and after the testimony of Mr. van der Merwe, especially having said that he never claimed any cancellation fee from them, yet the letters that we've been receiving from BNP as well, there was one that was even saying that the $5 million is the money that they will filter it down to SAA because it is claimed by Grisak AG PT1 Ltd.
You also were receiving sustained pressure to push through the approval of the cancellation fee. Is that correct?
Correct, Chair.
And you accept, I take it, that if it had been approved, it would have cost SAA 50 million rand if the funding had not come to bear fruit.
I accept that, Chair, with all the means that I tried to do behind the scenes to make sure that it doesn't get approved. But if it did go ahead, it was going to cost the company 50 million.
I'm sorry, before you proceed, I meant to ask you yesterday, you have said that you received a lot of pressure from Ms. Myeni.
Yes, Chair.
I would like you to articulate in as clear a manner as you can exactly what it is that she was saying to you, which you regarded as putting pressure on you on different occasions.
Yes, Chair. On different occasions, as I've highlighted yesterday, that earlier, after I joined SAA, she said she does not write anything down. I would receive calls, Chair, a minimum of 3 a day from the chairperson of the board. One thing that was consistent in her messages is the pace that I am moving. It's as if it's business as usual, and it is not business as usual. We need to move. We are delaying things. Why are we taking unnecessary documents to the board? The board has given us approval to go ahead with the transaction, yet I want to keep on sending back the documents to the board. So all the time, the pressure was more on what are you waiting for, approve. Certain things are under your delegation and acting CEOs at delegation, so we must approve. Specifically on the cancellation fee, Chair, especially when I sent the term sheet and I included the non-binding, that's where the pressure was then mounting to say, she even also said I was appointed and they thought I would be in the team that is turning around the company. It looks like I do not appreciate the pressure that they are in as the board in terms of getting the funding. My pace is very slow. I treat the business as if it's business as usual. There's no need for me to be including certain clauses that do not have anything to do with the funders. So one pressure was take out the non-binding because the funders now have got the perception that SAA does not need money. So the pressure were along those lines, Chair. Also allow me perhaps, because it's one of my evidence, where she will request certain things, Chair. For an example, there was an event where she said to me she thought I was coming from rural areas, which I agreed because I am, Chair, coming from rural areas. She said, but under my leadership, SAA procurement spend is still 2% of the 24 billion. So I then endeavored to get the information for her to say, Chair, if you look at the total expenditure of SAA, which at the time was 24 billion, the biggest 60% of that expenditure, Chair, was made up of jet fuel, of salaries, of lease rentals, because SAA only owned 9 aircrafts, but had a fleet of 66. So the rest is lease rentals where you pay in dollars. The other one was the maintenance reserves. So I then said, as much as you can give the black players the job. But if you don't play into this big five of the big ticket items, it will not really make a mark. And I do not believe that there's a black player, for an example. I did say we haven't tested the market, but who will buy the aircraft, for an example? She then, following a meeting, she gave me, for an example, 2 names of the companies, and then she said, now that you said black people don't have money to buy aircrafts, do you think black people don't have money to even insure the aircrafts? I said, I can look into that, Chair, because insuring of the aircraft also is linked with the lease rentals, because normally there's a clause on the lease rentals that will dictate who can insure the aircraft. And then myself and my team, the fleet committee, looked at we then looked at the different aircraft types with the insurance clauses, and all of them, Chair, were saying the aircraft should be insured by an internationally recognized insurance company. And that is the clause that is dictated by the lessors themselves, because they own the aircraft. So I went back to her to say, Chair, I won't be able to do, to check and to include the local insurers, because they will be in breach of the contractual agreement. She then said, she saw it in my eyes, that I will not do it. So I asked, what do you mean, Chair? And then she said, she related a story to say she does have a child who's a chartered accountant. She doesn't say a lot like I do, but she sees it in the eye if she's not gonna do something. So she said she saw that in my eyes when she was giving me an instruction that I'm not gonna do it. So those were the type of pressures that I was getting, Chair. Some of the examples, I've included them in my statement.
Okay, no, that's fine, those that we have included. Now, of course, the truth is that there was a certain degree of urgency in finalizing, in getting funds for SAA, because, as you said yesterday, the maturity dates for certain loans were coming up soon.
Yes, Chair.
Yeah. Now, if she were to say, yes, she did put pressure on you, but the pressure she put on you was legitimate, because as chairperson of the board, she needed to make sure that SAA didn't find itself in a situation where those maturity dates arrived and there were no funds and disaster would then happen. What would you say?
I would agree and say yes and no, Chair. More because one thing, we were working together in terms of all of us knew that there are loans that are maturing, but the pressure that she was more putting was she wanted us not to take the things to the board, and that was the board transaction. So all the decisions needed to be taken by the board. So she was then putting pressure that there's no need, we are bombarding the board with unnecessary approvals. So she did not want us to take documents to the board, Chair. I'm in agreement with the loans that were about to mature, and I had the appreciation of that as well.
Yes, the importance of the question I was asking you is that it's important that I know if the pressure that she put on you was for you to do something wrong, something illegal, something unprocedural, something against the policy of SAA, or maybe it was not necessarily pressure to make you do wrong things, but it was pressure that you do the right thing, but you act maybe with more haste in the light of the emergency. So it's important that I get the picture as to which pressure you are talking about? Was it to do something wrong, to do the right thing, and to what extent are you basing what you say on what she said, and to what extent you are basing what you're saying on your own impressions? That's why I wanted to know exactly what she said.
Yes.
So what do you say?
Yes, Chair. I'm saying certain pressure was based on the performance because loans were maturing, but the pressure that says don't take things to the board, yet this is a board transaction. So basically, it was beyond my mandate and beyond acting CEO's mandate, Chair. The decisions and the responsibility and accountability needed to be taken by the board, because in terms of DOA, this is the board transaction. So now in a way, she was asking us to do illegal things that I feel if you do them, she will again come back to you and say you did things that were illegal.
And would you be able to say, or what would you say if she were to say, I genuinely believed that those things did not need to be taken to the board? I wouldn't have asked you not to take to the board things that I knew should go to the board. What would you say if she were to come here and say that?
I would say, Chair, she will be being not truthful, especially that the recent delegation of authority was approved after I joined SAA. So it was very fresh to everyone's mind in terms of how much is the authority for CEO, for CFO, how much is the delegation, things that you need to take to the board. So it was not an old document. It is on the pack. It was approved when I was there, Chair. Yes.
So you say she knew that that the things that she was saying you shouldn't take to the board were things that should be taken to the board?
Yes, Chair.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Nhantsi, just a few follow-up questions in relation to that engagement with the chair, if I may. Do you know whether Ms. Myeni knew about the provisions of Section 66 of the Public Finance Management Act, which require the accounting authority of any SOE to approve any borrowing by that SOE?
Please come again.
Section 66
Yes.
of the PFMA
Yes.
says borrowing decisions by any public entity must be done by the accounting authority, and in the case of SAA, that is the board. The
Yes.
board is the accounting authority. Do you know whether Ms. Myeni would have known of that legal provision? It is referenced in the funding policy of SAA, amongst other places.
Chair, I would assume that she knew that.
Was it ever discussed at the meetings that the board always would have to approve borrowings?
I don't recall it having discussed, but having appreciated the fact that she has been the chair of the board of SAA for quite some time, and before becoming the chair of the board, she was the board member of SAA, I would reasonably assume that she knew.
It's certainly one of her duties as a board member to know
Agree.
of the applicable legislation, isn't it?
Yes, Chair, I agree.
And may I ask also in relation to what was lawful or not at the time, about the National Treasury's instruction note of 3 of 2016-2017. Ms. Nhantsi, you gave to me yesterday morning before your testimony an extract from it. Overnight, I was able to source the full notice. Chair and Ms. Nhantsi, you'll find it in your file, and that's DD2, and it commences at page 324.
What's the page number?
324.
Thank you.
Chair, this is a note that actually came up in the ESCOM evidence in relation to Brakfontein. So that is why I have any familiarity with it. It's an interesting practice note because it comes out in April of 2016. It is made operative from the 1st of May. But you'll see from the heading what it was directed at was preventing and combating abuse in supply chain management system. So this is National Treasury in mid-2016, directing all public entities and departments under the PFMA about certain constraints that they were placing on the decision-making that boards of SOEs, for example, could take. And one of those constraints you'll find at page 327. It's under section 9. This was also the provision that was relevant in the ESCOM evidence. What it required is that if there was to be an extension of any existing contract above 15% of the value of that contract, there would have to be prior written approval from National Treasury for that expanded contract to be concluded. Ms. Nhantsi, was the board made aware of this at the time that they decided to expand the scope of BNP to include sourcing of funds?
Chair, this proposal, the instruction 3 from National Treasury, as you rightfully say, it was effective May 2016.
1st of May, yes.
1st of May. It talks about anything above 15% has to be taken to National Treasury prior. It was not, Chair, this was not implemented at SAA.
But was it known to the members of the board that this was a requirement?
I'm not aware, Chair, if it was known at the time. Also, I think I became aware of it later in the year. I'm not sure if we received it at the same date, Chair.
Well, it's a National Treasury instruction to all accounting officers of departments and constitutional institutions. So you don't know whether SAA was alerted to the existence of this notice?
I don't know, Chair, and all the communications, they come via, in terms of the protocol, via the chairperson of the board. So I'm not aware, I'm not sure when she received this from National Treasury.
But if anyone received it, it would have been the chairperson of the board?
Yes, Chair.
Thank you. Are you satisfied that the expansion of the scope of BNP Capital's contract would have been within the ambit of this practice note and consequently ought to have obtained the written authority and approval of National Treasury before it was concluded?
Based on this, yes, Chair.
Ms. Nhantsi, if we can then go back, I was concluding on your evidence in relation to the cancellation fee. The pressure that was exerted on you and which you've clarified to the chair, and your understanding at the time that it was untoward, the insistence on the payment of the cancellation fee. Ms. Nhantsi, were you aware at the time of your obligations under the Prevention and Combating of Corrupt Activities Act?
Come again?
Were you aware at the time that you recommended to the board that they approve the cancellation fee, that you had certain obligations under the Prevention and Combating of Corrupt Activities Act to report any knowledge of or suspicion that acts of corruption, fraud, or theft were taking place in a company?
Yes, I was aware.
So you accept that you are in a position of authority in relation to SAA?
Yes, I do.
So why did you not take those steps that are required of you to be taken under Section 34 of that Act?
I considered that, Chair, but I was still going to take those steps, and it's one of the instances where I would say it was overtaken by events. Whilst you suspect that on this cancellation fee there are foul plays and all that, you then received, we received communication from Weber Wenzel, and we communicated with BNP. So there were lots of things happening, Chair. One thing that kept my focus was to ensure that if BNP does not have the FSP license, as it was a critical criteria, my main concern was to safeguard the assets of the company. I needed to ensure that I cancel the transaction with BNP. So whilst I was aware of the combat and prevention of corrupt activities, Chair, I was more focusing on protecting the assets of the company, because I wanted to cancel with the pressure as well, because during the time that we gave BNP on the 13th of July and the 20th, the calls kept on coming from the chairperson of the board saying we should not cancel with BNP because BNP will sue us. So in my engagements with her, I used to ask what would be their basis to sue us, and she would say, no, we need to give them the cancellation fee, we need to approve things, we promise them that they must go source funds for us, the funders are out there getting money for us, and now we are cancelling. So I then said, no, Chair, but the critical criteria where other companies were disqualified was the FSB license. So yes, Chair, as much as the combat and the prevention of corrupt activities, I knew about it. It was not on the top of my agenda. My focus was to ensure that I cancel the transaction with BNP should they not have the FSB license, especially after starting to suspect as well that BNP as well looks like is misrepresenting to us, because on the 6th of July, they gave us a copy of the FSB license, and now they're not responding to us. So I agree, but the focus was to protect the assets of the company, Chair.
So you accept that you breached your legal obligation under Section 34 of that Act?
I accept, Chair, but as I've highlighted that I was looking at the bigger picture in terms of because at the end, nothing happened. I safeguard the assets of the company. The company was not in any financial prejudice. I think that's what I was interested in or focusing on.
Ms. Nhantsi, do you accept that you did not act in the best interests of SAA when you recommended approval of the cancellation fee?
We discussed this, Chair, yesterday, that I acted in the best interest of the company because of the pressure, I recommended it, but I did work behind the scenes in terms of talking to the other board members to ensure that the transaction or the approval does not go through. So I acted with the information and the pressure that I had at the time. I believe that to the best of my ability, I acted in the best interest of the company to save it.
Ms. Nhantsi, in fairness, I must put this to you for your comment. What you could have done, I would like to suggest to you, to protect the best interests of SAA, was to prepare that submission on the 4th of July that you prepared, to notify the board that there had been this request for a cancellation fee from BNP, to set out under point 2 of that template how it had been motivated, and under point 3 of that template, headed recommendation, acting in the best interest of the company would have been to recommend that it not be approved. A, because there was no basis for it. B, because it would be a cost that would not justifiably be borne by the company in its precarious financial position. And C, because you were highly suspicious at that stage of the circumstances surrounding it. What is your comment in response?
Thank you, Chair. Whilst I appreciate the fact that I did not put that I'm not recommending, I think I also came to the Commission more for the South Africans to understand the pressure that was mounting on us, the environment that we were working under. And I also stipulated yesterday that whilst we are under pressure, I did not act negligently by just accepting what the Chair is saying and do it. I did, under the circumstances, and also if the Commission can appreciate the pressure, Chair, that we're under, and at some point I was even scared. I understand the fact that the recommendation is saying approve, but I would also appreciate if this Commission can also appreciate the steps that I did in terms of communicating with the board members and ensuring that eventually the transaction does not go through. Some of the things is difficult, Chair, but I really want to paint a picture to say we were really under a lot of pressure. If it was according to me, I wouldn't have even taken the submission to the board. But we were working under pressure to a point where I even said it yesterday that there were a point where I would be scared, Chair.
I want to hear more about what you were scared of. What were you thinking was going to happen? What were you scared of?
Chair, when I joined, perhaps let me start by saying, when I joined SAA, I was very excited to be part of the team that will turn around the company. I believed that I do have the skill and the competency to work at SAA, but when I was on the ground, I realized that the work is doable. But there are these political things where these undue pressures that are coming, especially from the board. So when I joined SAA, I would hear certain things. For example, there were certain people that were suspended because they were, sometimes they were saying no to the decisions or the instructions from the chair. So I decided that I would stand my ground. But as the pressure was mounting, as I said yesterday, I even one day told my husband that I don't know what I got myself into when I joined SAA. Maybe I joined SAA at the wrong time because the pressures are coming left, right, and center, Chair, where you are given this instruction to do this, you are given an instruction to do this, and certain things are not lawful. For an example, you will just be given a CV to say, appoint this person in the procurement space, and when the processes are done, for an example, if I can give you that example, when Chair one of the days told me that there's a guy who struggles and does not have a job, and this person, when this person was praying, he saw a vision from God that the person who will assist you in your problems is Miss Myeni. So I said, oh wow, the Chair. And then she then said, procurement area is in shambles. Appoint this person in procurement. At the end of that discussion that I had, Chair, with the chairperson of the board, I had a missed call, I had a message, and also a CV from this person. So whilst we were discussing with the chairperson, I then assumed that she gave me his details. So through the process, the recruitment process, when I spoke to the acting chief procurement officer, because it was his area, he knew about it because he didn't ask me questions. So means Chair spoke to him as well. So the interviews were set, Chair, because there was there were vacancies in the procurement space. The person came in on the interviews. He failed dismally. I didn't attend, Chair, the interviews, but I was told by the Mr. Lester Peters that he failed dismally. When I called the chairperson to give an update, that Chair, unfortunately, this person failed dismally. Chair summoned me to take I told him in the afternoon, he summoned me to go to Durban and take a first flight following day.
To come and talk to you about that interview.
Yes, Chair.
And you did so?
I did so, Chair. I took a first flight following day. We met at Isibaya, yes, in Durban. A first question that she asked me was, how can a person with LLB fail an interview? I was still casual about it, Chair, then, and then I said, no, Chairperson, even a chartered accountant fails an interview. And then she said, does this mean you're not going to take instructions or implement instructions from the board? Again, casually, I said, Chair, did this have a board resolution? And then I could see from her face, Chair, that I think my answers are wrong. And then I changed to say, because now I was not feeling comfortable and I'm not in Joburg and I don't know, Chair. I just felt uncomfortable. And then I said, No, perhaps, Chair, allow me to go back, and we're gonna look in the procurement area with the team. Maybe there are other vacancies there that are lower than what we interviewed the guy for. Maybe this position was very high for him. And then he asked me, are you gonna do that? And then I said, yes, Chair, I will do it. And then that's how I got out of it, Chair, and I never implemented that.
And is that all that you were called to Durban to discuss with her?
There were 3 items, Chair. The second one that we discussed, during the time I joined SAA, there was a decision that was taken by the board. I'm not sure whether it was coming from National Treasury to vet all top 100.
I'm sorry, you don't need to go to deal with those unless
No, this
they
is
are
this is-
examples of
Yes, this is-
pressure that was put on you.
Yes, Chair, this is another
Okay.
example. This is one of the topics that we discussed on that
Yes,
day.
okay.
The vetting process by Security State Agency was in progress at SAA. She told me that there were some candidates have been vetted already, some have not. But in my finance department, there's one person who has failed the vetting, and I cannot have a person who has failed the vetting in the finance area because it's sensitive.
In whose section was that? In the chairs, SAA chairs section, or in yours?
In mine.
In your section now?
She said in finance,
Oh,
and,
in
and
finance,
finance
okay.
was headed by me, Chair. So I then said, okay, where are the results? And then she didn't give me the results, but she said the person who failed the vetting in your area is Miss Lindsay or Linsky. So I suggest that you go back tomorrow, have a meeting with Lindsay, and offline meeting, and you must give Lindsay 2 options. Either she must check where else can you place her in the organization, or you must fire her. I then raise concerns, Chair, because it will trigger the labor disputes, especially if it was not part of employees' contract. So I also took that and I came back. I discussed that with the acting CEO and raised my concerns to say we need to have a uniform way of dealing with the results that are coming from SSA, and this is what the chair has said I must do on my side. So acting CEO as well agreed with me to say, let's wait until the entire process is concluded, and we'll discuss it with EXCO and come up with a policy on how to do, on how to handle the ones that have passed and the ones that have failed the vetting. That day, Chair, I got a call from Chair in the afternoon asking if I spoke to Lindsay. And I said, no, I didn't talk to Lindsay, but I spoke to the acting CE. I then explained what we discussed and what we agreed. And then she was furious to say, she gives me instructions and I don't follow instructions. Instead, I go and discuss with acting CEO. If she wanted to discuss with acting CEO, she should have done so. I said, but Chair, he's also my direct report, and we're also protecting the company from the labor disputes and all that. I then even suggested to her to say, maybe she needs to talk to the acting CEO, and then we formulate a view on how to treat these, and also perhaps check with the legal department and ensure that the company will be protected from the labor disputes, Chair.
Okay, so those are the matters that you discussed, at least which relate to some of the pressure
Yes,
that
Chair.
you say she put on you.
Yes, Chair.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Nhantsi, just 2 follow-up questions in relation to that state security agency vetting.
Yes.
When did that occur?
I think it occurred between June, I stand to be corrected, I can check, I think from June 2016. But I don't know the exact, but it was in 2016.
And who in SAA was vetted by the state security agency?
The meeting that we had was all the top 100 executives will be vetted. I heard from the passages that some didn't submit the information and some did. I'm one of the people that submitted the information.
Did you regard it as strange that 100 people at SAA were being vetted by the State Security Agency?
I regarded it as strange, Chair, because that is in my understanding, that is the process that you do when, especially the top secret security clearance, because the SSA was doing the top secret security clearance. So it's strange because my understanding is at executives we are at different levels and will be exposed to different confidential information. So you wouldn't take the entire 100 and vet for top secret security. Some would be vetted for the clearances that are lower than that. So it was strange.
Did your position ever require you to receive top secret documents?
I didn't believe so, but I did because I was instructed to do it.
And I have it from your statement that you were told the basis on which Ms. Olitsky had failed her state security vetting. If you go to page 21, you record there that Ms. Myeni told you that she'd failed it because of dual citizenship. Is that correct?
Correct, Chair.
Did you regard there as being something more behind Ms. Myeni's instruction to use a dual citizenship issue to remove Ms. Olitsky from the finance department?
Yes, Chair. When she gave me this instruction, it was when I was suspecting that there are things that Ms. Myeni is doing, because first she asked me to appoint somebody in the procurement area, and I assumed that she wanted somebody to be her eyes and ears in the procurement space. Maybe now she had somebody in mind that she wanted to put on Ms. Olitsky's position.
And did you raise that at all with her?
No, I never raised it, Chair.
And then just to clarify, in relation to the Chair's earlier question, he was engaging with you about in what respects you felt scared. And then you told us about this increasing pressure and the different instances of it.
You are reading my mind.
Please,
I wanted to go back to it because I realized she told me a lot of things, but we didn't get to that. But continue, I think you know exactly
Indeed.
what I wanted.
Can you clarify for us what constituted your fear? Because there seemed to be a range of options. It may have been that your job would have been on the line. It may have been different types of fear that you were experiencing. In one of your answers, you referenced not being in Johannesburg and feeling uncomfortable. Can you please try and enable us to understand what that fear was like?
Yes, Chair.
And what it is you were scared of as well.
Chair, I was scared. When I was in Durban, I was scared. I will put it bluntly, Chair. I was scared of my life, and I'm not saying Chair was going to do anything, but something came to my mind that I need to be careful. I was scared of my life. I was never scared of losing my job, Chair, because I believed that I work hard, I'm dedicated, my work ethics talk for itself. I can get another job.
You mean if you say you can get another job, it means you would lose this one and get another one.
Yes, Chair. It was clear to me that I was gonna eventually lose, especially after the cancellation of the BNP. It was clear that I was gonna lose it because some of the instructions that Chair would give me would say, you are not performing because you don't have KPIs.
So when you say you are not scared of losing the job, it's not because you didn't think that you could lose your job at SAA, but you're simply saying losing the SAA job wasn't something you were worried about because getting another job would not be a problem. Is that what you are saying?
Yes, Chair. What I'm trying to paint is I was doing my work to the best of my ability and with dedication and all that. it was never in my forefront that I should please certain people because I need to protect my job. To clarify on the one for especially after the transaction of BNP, I knew after we cancelled the BNP contract that Chair might do what Ms. Kwinana told me earlier, because Ms. Kwinana used to relate that you have got a shelf life. That's what she used to say. You've got a shelf life with Ms. Myeni. If you don't do certain instructions, and then she related instances where she will go to Sunnyside Cafe and disguise herself and write whistleblowing
Who is she now?
emails.
Who was she? Who is she that used to go to
Miss
Sunnyside?
Myeni.
Okay.
Ms. Myeni used to go to, this is what was related by Ms. Kwinana, and it was also in the article in 2017 on the Mail and Guardian where Ms. Kwinana stated this, to say, Ms. Myeni, if she wants to get rid of you, she sometimes goes to the extent of going to the Sunnyside Cafe and disguise herself and write whistleblowing emails. And then from there, because the custodian of whistleblower at SAA was the chief internal audit, she would come and then put pressure on the chief internal audit to either suspend you or to dismiss you or appoint some firms to do the work.
So in the end, what is it that you were scared of then?
In Durban, I was scared of my life.
Yes, you thought that you could be killed.
Something like that, Chair.
And on other occasions, when you say pressure was put on you and you were scared, what were you scared of? What did you think would happen and who would do what? What is it that you were scared of?
Chair, I was, on all the occasions, let me say I was scared of my life, Chair. And with all these pressures, and also with Mr. Mngadi and everyone, pressure coming from everywhere, I was scared of my life.
And did you think that if you did not you did not carry out certain instructions, or you did not do certain things that you were opposed to doing, you could be harmed?
Come again, Chair?
Did you think that if you did not carry out certain instructions with which you did not agree, or if you did not do certain things in regard to which pressure was being put on you, you would be harmed?
Yes, Chair, I did. Those came across my mind. Also, Chair, one thing that I had in mind in terms of dealing with Chair of the board, when I joined SAA, I heard a story where my predecessor, in fact, I think Ms. Timbel's testimony said so, that there was a point where Mr. Wolf had a pen and then he recorded Ms. Myeni. So you think those things, that to the extent of people thinking of even recording you, so what the kind of person you are, that people now are trying to build evidence and even recording you and all that. I was scared, Chair, that I could be harmed.
Okay, thank you.
And just to clarify, was there ever a direct threat to you to harm you?
No, Chair.
Ms. Nhantsi, I'd like to go to the question of Ms. Stimple's suspension.
Yes.
And I propose to deal with it briefly. It occurred on the 5th of July, 2016. And the reason that you gave Ms. Stimple in her suspension notice on the day for suspending her was that she had been involved in, and I'm quoting here, the removal of company confidential documents without permission from procurement. Do you recall that?
Yes, I do, Chair.
My first,
What page is that?
Chair, you will find it in the Stimple bundle. It's DD1B, and it's at page 570.
Thank you. Yes.
Ms. Nhantsi, you'll see that at the end of the first paragraph, you notify her that she's suspended from work for an investigation or the outcome of a disciplinary hearing, which includes, amongst others, the stated reason at the time was removal of company confidential tender documents without permission from procurement. You see that?
Yes, Chair, I do.
Did you take this decision on your own, or were you instructed to take it, to suspend Ms. Stimple?
I consulted, before I take the decision, consulted with HR and also the legal department and the procurement. Before the decision was taken, we assessed the seriousness of taking the confidential documents that belong to procurement.
Ms. Nhantsi, in your evidence yesterday, you made some reference to your concerns around confidentiality of procurement documents. Do you recall that?
I made concerns.
You made some comments
Oh, yes.
about the confidentiality of procurement documents.
Yes,
Do you recall that?
I do.
It's in the context of your evidence where we were probing whether you could have asked for the underlying bid submissions when you were asked to recommend the appointment of BNP after the tender. Do you recall that?
I recall it.
I recall in your evidence you said you thought that there was a provision of the supply chain management policy that set out that those documents are confidential, and so you couldn't have seen them. Do you recall that?
Yes, I do.
But we probed it, and as I have your evidence, you accepted the fact that if you had wanted to see them as somebody who'd been asked to recommend that decision, you would have been entitled to see them. Do you accept that?
I said I never asked for them.
Correct.
But I assumed that those would be given to me.
Correct. And that's useful because then we don't need to go to the supply chain management policy. I did that overnight, and I certainly could find no provision that said a decision maker in SAA who is asked to make a decision on a procurement process cannot have access to the bid documents. So we agree on that.
Chair, that's what I was told at SAA, that those documents, nobody except the procurement can have them. That is why I was relating a narrative that says even the members of those committees, they signed the confidentiality agreement.
Yes, Ms. Nhantsi, they sign confidentiality agreements because in terms of the policy, they may not divulge the contents of any bid to any bidder. In other words, external parties to SAA.
Even to SAA, my understanding, even to SAA staff.
Well, that is not in the policy. And as I understand your evidence, you regarded your role as to be responsible for ensuring proper process in SAA. Is that correct?
Yes, I'm correct.
So did you consider the policy yourself?
I was advised at that time, I didn't read the policy.
Okay. So will you accept that the policy does not say anywhere that people in a decision-making role within SAA may not have access to the underlying bid submissions in respect of which they are asked to make a decision?
It might say that, Chair, but it is a known factor at SAA that those bid documents are very confidential and they stay at the procurement department and they don't leave the procurement department, Chair.
So was it that understanding that motivated you to suspend Ms. Stimple on the 5th of July on that basis?
Yes, I was advised that it is very serious, and if those documents can leak to the media or anywhere, it has got dire consequences for the company because those documents are not supposed to leave procurement department at all. I would also clarify, Chair, to even say we had to firm up the procurement department in terms of ensuring that we limit the access of other staff members entering into procurement after Ms. Stimble took the documents on the floor without permission. So we had to now, currently, after Ms. Stimble took the documents at procurement, we had to tighten up the security. So not all the SAA employees can enter now into the procurement department, people that are working there have to open for you.
Ms. Stimple's evidence was that you instructed her not to attend a National Treasury meeting on the day because you were concerned that she was going to share those documents with National Treasury. Did you say that to her?
No, I didn't say that to her. I was instructing her to come back and not attend the meeting because I even told her that I'm with Silas Matsauza in my office, and he's relating that she took the documents. I wanted her to come back so that we can level the ground and I can understand from her side as well. Why did she take the documents that she knows that she was not supposed to have them?
And Ms. Stimple's evidence is that she asked for an opportunity to explain the circumstances under which she took the documents on the day, and you did not afford her that opportunity. Do you accept that?
I do not recall saying that, Chair.
But you don't dispute that you might have?
No, I don't remember that I said that, Chair.
Ms. Nhantsi, there's one small final aspect and then my concluding propositions to put to you. Chair, I'm receiving notes that we have surpassed the tea time. I wasn't on track because of our slightly later start. It shouldn't be many more minutes with Ms. Nhantsi. I'm in your hands. We may want to complete it and then take the tea break.
How much time do you think?
10 minutes.
About
maximum.
10 minutes. Okay, let's see if we can finish at 11:45.
That will be helpful, Chair. Thank you. We're indebted because there'll be a new witness and we can use the tea time to change over.
Yeah.
Ms. Nhantsi, in your statement, you dealt with the circumstances around the suspension of Dr. Dawa. I would like to just deal with it briefly.
Okay.
You suspended him a few days after you joined SAA, is that correct?
Correct, Chair.
And I take it a consequence of you doing it so shortly after you arrived that you didn't, at the stage that you suspended him, know whether the charges against him were valid or not.
Come again?
When you suspended Dr. Dawa,
Yes.
had you investigated whether the charges against him were valid or not?
No, Chair, I didn't investigate. In fact, when I joined SAA, I was told by two board members, Ms. Myeni and Ms. Kwinana, already at the time when I joined, a legal firm was already appointed to deal with allegations against Dr. Dawa, and the charges were drafted already. High level, what I understood was one of the charges that were leveled against Dr. Dawa was they attended road shows. The board members attended road shows together with the executives of SAA, specifically where they were explaining to black suppliers the process of how to do tenders and submit to SAA with the view of 30% set aside. There was a resolution that was taken by the board before I joined of 30% set aside, meaning all the tenders that are going out at SAA, the bidders should put aside 30% for women, for people with disability, for rural, but it's 4 categories, Chair. So my understanding is when they came back from all the road shows, they gave a list to Dr. Dawa of the suppliers that he should include in the database and do business with, and Dr. Dawa didn't implement those. So high level, it's one of the charges that he had, but I gave him the suspension letter, and after the processes were done, gave him the dismissal letter more because it was a direct line. He was reporting to me.
Thank you, Ms. Nhantsi. That's all we wanted to get clarity on. Dr. Dawa will be one of the witnesses, but you didn't have knowledge of the veracity of the charges against him when you handed him the suspension
No,
notice.
Chair.
Thank you. Ms. Nhantsi, I would then, in conclusion, simply like to draw out the essence, as I will submit it is, of your evidence and give you an opportunity to comment. It will be brief. I think my note is that there are about 7 strands of it which are of particular importance It will be our submission to the work of the Commission. So if I may do that. Ms. Nhantsi, your evidence I suggest to you for your comment indicates that there was extraordinary pressure brought to bear on you to support decisions in the financial interest of a third party. Do you accept that?
I accept it, Chair.
Your evidence also seems to indicate that there was a behind-the-scenes scheme between Mr. Mngadi of Nedbank and Ms. Myeni to enrich themselves at the expense of SAA.
Agreed, Chair.
Your evidence also seems to indicate that Ms. Myeni shared confidential company information with Mr. Mngadi,
Agreed, Chair.
that Ms. Myeni used state security vetting to seek to remove employees that she did not want in certain positions,
Agreed, Chair.
that Ms. Myeni instructed that persons be appointed in positions without foundation,
Agreed, Chair.
and that you heard from Ms. Kwinana that Ms. Myeni used to make false whistleblowing reports against employees that she wanted out of the way.
Agreed, Chair.
Ms. Nhantsi, if Mr. van der Merwe's evidence is correct, and GRISAG had incurred no costs whatsoever in their work on the funding opportunity at SAA, do you accept that the entire motivation from BNP to be paid the cancellation fee amounted to a fraud on SAA?
Yes, Chair, I do.
And I have it from your evidence that you accept that you failed to report a corrupt activity or a suspicion that one had taken place in relation to the cancellation fee at SAA?
Yes, I accepted it, Chair, saying it was overtaken by events, yes.
Thank you, Chair. Unless there is further from you.
Thank you. Yes. Yes.
Chair, if you may allow,
Yes.
just 1 second, the concluding remarks from my side.
Yes, before the concluding remark that you,
Okay.
or remarks that you might wish to make, you said that a cancellation fee is common in this kind of transaction, if I understood you correctly, in relation to the raising of funds. Did I understand you correctly?
Chair, yes, I said the cancellation fee is common, but I was not specifically saying to this kind of transaction.
Oh, okay. Well, I thought the question you were being asked was more in relation to the raising of funds, whether a cancellation fee, to your knowledge, is common in the industry.
Chair, the cancellation fee is common to the industry. I take that from the experience that I have in auditing the space. So the clauses of penalty and the cancellation fees are normal, but they are substantiated and they get quantified. The reason why I asked BNP for the quantification is, for example, if we take an environment of a consulting space, before you produce a legal opinion or before you produce an audit opinion, there's a lot of work that you do behind the scenes, your man hours, your disbursements and all that. So should you cancel, the person that has done the work is entitled to some cancellation fee. So it was in that context where I said it's common in the industry. Hence, I was probing BNP and wanting to understand the basis of the cancellation fee, because I would understand if they give me the invoice, the flight costs, the man hours of the expertise that they used, they took out of the other projects to go and negotiate the investments. So it was, for me, the amount was exorbitant, but I understood the principle.
Well, as I understand the cancellation fee that BNP was talking about, and if your understanding is different, you must tell me. As I understand it, what they were talking about was that if SAA cancelled the idea of them raising funds for SAA. And I seem to think that they were saying that even before any contract could be concluded between themselves and SAA, then SAA would have to pay a certain percentage which they gave if the cancellation was due to factors beyond their control. Is that your understanding as well? In other words, one, they were not saying pay us for the work we have actually done and for the time we have spent on the work, and we will give you our timesheets, how much time we spent doing this or doing that in order to try and get funds for you. But they were simply saying, we don't want you to look at how much work we have actually done. You'll just have to accept that we have done some work. How much it took us to do it is neither here nor there. But if you cancel, and it's because of reasons beyond our control as BNP, then you must pay such and such a percentage. That was my understanding of what they were talking about. Is your understanding different?
Chair, slightly.
Yes.
Because when I asked them to substantiate the cancellation fee, which at the end I didn't agree with it, they attempted to give a breakdown of I'm not sure where is it on the file.
Maybe even before you go there, but
Chair, they gave the breakdown of the man hours, the experience that they are using to negotiate the fees. They listed also the flight costs, the accommodation, and on top of that, they then said in that letter that Grisak AG should SAA cancel will charge them $5 million US.
well,
So these three, that's why I'm saying slightly, Chair.
well, normally, if somebody is going to do some work for you,
Yes.
normally you would agree that they would be paid per hour or per day or per month or per week or per year
Yeah.
for doing that work, and you agree on the rate,
Okay.
and that person would then do the work, and that person will not be paid if they've not, for an hour that they did not use to do your work, or for a month when they were not doing your work, unless they are on leave if they are employed. But if it's in an independent contractor, they are not going to be paid if they are not doing their work, okay? But you can have another arrangement. That is an arrangement where the payment, their payment, is not dependent on how much work they have put in. It's dependent on the results, like a commission. You say, you ask me to get you 15 billion rand. If I get you 15 billion rand, you will give me 5% of 15 billion rand. Irrespective of whether it has taken me a week to get you the 15 billion rand or a month. Irrespective of whether I just made one call and got somebody to give you 15 billion rand, you will give me 5% of that. You understand the distinction?
Yes, I do, Chair. Yes.
Now, my understanding of what BNP was talking about was an arrangement that is along the lines of a commission. That's why it was important for them to talk about a percentage.
Yes, sir.
Because if you are going to base the payment on hourly rates, you have got to talk about an hourly rate, not a percentage. You understand?
Yes, I do, Chair.
Yes. So now my question is whether this understanding I have of how they wanted to be paid accords with your understanding as well.
Yes, it does, Chair, because when we discussed the success fee rate, it's exactly that, to say the agreement was you go get 15 billion and we'll pay you the success fee of 1.5%.
Yes.
Hence, when they introduced this new term and this new clause of cancellation fee, which was never part of the agreement when we gave them the letter of award, we had to take it back to the board because it's a new clause and it needs to be deliberated by the board because it's in addition basically to what was discussed. So it looks like, as you rightfully saying, if they make a phone call and then they will, and we cancel, because also SAA is a public entity, they've got challenges, we might cancel. So at the back of my mind, Chair, if you ask me, I agree with you, but my question that I had, or my suspicion, which was eventually then confirmed to be correct, my understanding is BNP knew that their FSB license was cancelled or was suspended by FSB, and they wanted to get money out of SAA irrespective, whether it's 256 million or whether it's 49.9 million, because one, they misled us or they misrepresented and gave us still the FSB license, yet they knew that it's suspended. But now, they then wanted another way of getting money out of SAA because they know that FSB license is suspended, and should SAA know that, the contract will be cancelled. And then now they roped in a new clause of the cancellation fee.
Yes, but I just go back to what you know to be the norm, and
Okay.
I want this because Mr. Van der Merwe was asked whether a cancellation fee is a norm in the sector, and my recollection is that he said it was not. So I'm trying to establish that. So when you said a cancellation fee is a norm in the sector, were you talking about a success, what you call a success fee, or what has been referred to as a success fee, or you were talking about a fee that would be paid under the circumstances that BNP was putting forward?
Chair, I was talking about the success fee, but I was then generalizing on the cancellation fee to say it is the norm. If you cancel and get the goods and services, I was not specific to this transaction.
So now that I think you have agreed, we have the same understanding.
Yes.
Of what BNP was talking about when they were talked about a cancellation fee. What is your evidence? Is it that it's a norm for that kind of fee to be charged, or is it not?
It's not a norm, Chair.
It is not a norm.
Yes.
Okay. Now you told me how Ms. Myeni would speak to you about the employment and dismissal of certain employees. Somebody must be employed, somebody must be dismissed. You talked about the dismissal in the context of the employee who apparently had failed security clearance, and she was the one who raised that issue, Ms. Myeni, with you. Was that an issue that you expected to be raised with you by the chair of the board, or would that be an issue that you would expect the person you reported to, namely the acting CEO, to raise? As far as you know, is that a matter that the chair of a board would really be involved in an institution such as SAA, parastatal?
Chair, that's the matter that I expected to be raised by the acting CEO. Mm-hmm. Hence, I came back and discussed it with him, because the day-to-day running of the business, the acting CEO is the one who's responsible for that. Mm-hmm. And also, if you look at the structure of SAA, the board gets involved in appointing the CEO, and also in recommending and approving the CFO only. All the other structures below that, the board doesn't get involved.
Would it be fair to say that when you made the recommendation that you made to the board to approve the cancellation fee in circumstances where you were against the approval on your evidence, and you went to the extent of contacting some of the members of the board with a view to influencing them not to approve the cancellation fee, would it be fair to say you sought to strike a balance between the interests of the company and the interests of your own interests in terms of what you were scared of?
Yes, Chair, it would be fair, especially if you say the balance would be to protect the company and also to protect my well-being. And well-being being was scared not to be harmed and all what we've discussed, yes, Chair. But also the focus, as I've been saying, is my work ethics are known, Chair, in the industry, and I've always worked towards acting in the best interest of the company and protecting the assets of the company.
What did you think would happen if you wrote the memorandum and your recommendation was that the cancellation, the board should not approve the cancellation fee, and all the board members saw that that was your stance?
Chair, we discussed this with the acting CEO. I think eventually we agreed that let's just put it there and then engage them behind the scenes. Yes,
Did you not want the chairperson to know, to see it in writing that you were saying the board should not approve?
Yes, I didn't want her to see that, and also I was not comfortable, and I didn't want her to even know that behind the scenes I'm talking to the other board members, roping that they must not approve it.
When you spoke to the other board members, did you ask them to keep the conversation between yourselves and each one of them, or the understanding, they did understand, the context was such that they did understand that you would not want them to tell the chairperson what you had said to them?
I didn't ask them, Chair. I assumed that the content is understood.
Yes.
Yes.
Because you did say what the chairperson had said to you, and you did say what your view was.
Yes, Chair.
Okay, all right. Anything?
No,
Nothing.
thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I think there is counsel for, I don't know who, that wants to come forward and
maybe, Chair,
make a
before
request.
that, you forgot
I forgot you wanted to say something. Yes.
Yes, please, Chair. Thank you so much. Chair, I really appreciate this opportunity that we get in this commission. I appreciate it more, especially from the executive point of view, for us to be heard of the frustrations that we go through on a day-to-day basis. And I would like to say, I think you tried to ask me a question yesterday, and I attempted to answer the question where you asked if I was the right person perhaps for the job. I would want to reaffirm that I strongly believe that I was the right person for the job, and but I never foresee the pressures that would come, which were basically not part of your day-to-day running of the business. So when I joined SAA, I was very excited to be in the team that will turn around the company. But the challenges, Chair, have made me a better person. let alone the fact that I ended up not having a job. But I believe that I've learned a lot from SAA, and any company that I'll be joining, I'll be using all the wisdom. One of the things that I take out is when I joined, I was very naive, thinking all the board members will always act in the best interest of the companies. Thank you, Chair.
No, thank you very much for having come to give your evidence. I will still hear more evidence, and there may be evidence that will contradict the evidence you have given, and I will make findings that I will consider appropriate to make in due course, but I do want you to know that we appreciate that you came to give evidence. There have been other senior managers, executives from parastatals and people who were employed in high positions in government departments who came and gave evidence and shared with the Commission the experiences they went through when they insisted that the right things be done and resisted attempts for wrong things to be done. And we want to hear from them because we want to know exactly what they may have gone through so that we can see at the end of the work of the Commission what we may need to recommend should be put in place to make sure that people who insist on the right things being done are protected and will not be victimized in any way. So do encourage others that you know may have something that's relevant to the terms of reference of the Commission to come forward and to share with the Commission and with the nation what they know. Excuse me, I still believe there are many out there who know a lot that happened, and they include senior people in government departments, past and present. They include ministers, deputy ministers, DGs, CEOs of parastatals, chief financial officers, and many others. I believe there are many who are still not coming forward, who know a lot that they should be coming forward to share with the Commission. And we just need everybody to urge them to do the right thing, to come forward and share all the information and the experiences they had. So thank you very much. But before I release you, I want to hear what Council has to say in case it needs you. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner.
Yes.
When I raised the hand at the time, there is a critical aspect of Mr. Mahlangu's evidence, which I was of the view that it would enrich the Commission's engagement with this witness if it was put
Yes.
to this witness before she leaves the stand. But
Yes.
on conferring with him, he's
Yes.
happy that he will deal with it in his testimony.
Okay.
And given the time constraints as well, we will address it
Yes. Okay. No, thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. Nhantsi. You are excused.
It's my pleasure. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Well, it's about 12 o'clock.
It is indeed, Chair.
The tea break is like lunch now, lunch break. We'll take the tea break until 12:15.
Thank you,
We
Chair.
adjourn. Yes, Ms. Hofmeyer.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, we now move the focus of the evidence in the aviation stream to a transaction that took place between South African Express and the Northwest Department of Transport. And we will hear evidence over the next number of days from witnesses related to that focus area of the investigation. Our first witness is Mr. Timothy Ngwenya. Prior to calling him up, Chair, if I may request an opportunity for the legal representatives of certain parties who have an interest in the evidence placing themselves on record.
Yes, let's do that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yes, thank you.
Mr. Chair, I appear on behalf of the Mafeking Airport Management Company as counsel.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I, Xolani Nyoka, briefed by Malaysian attorneys, I appear on behalf of Ms. Kutwano, the CFO who will be implicated in the evidence. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. If I may call Mr. Ngwenya to take up a seat at the witness table.
Thank you. Let him do so. Yes.
Chair, just for record purposes, Mr. Ngwenya's affidavit and annexures can be found in Exhibit DD5, if we may give it that reference for the record.
And the live art file containing Mr. Timothy Ngwenya's statement and annexures will be marked Exhibit DD5.
Thank you, Chair. If I may request for the witness to be sworn in.
Yes.
Please state your full names for the record.
I'm Timothy Ngwenya.
Do you have any objections to taking the prescribed oath?
Not at all, ma'am.
Do you consider the oath to be binding on your conscience?
Yes, I do.
Do you solemnly swear that all the evidence that you will give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? If so, please raise your right hand and say, "So help me God."
Help me God.
Thank you.
Yes, you may proceed.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Ngwenya, just to orientate you, in front of you on the table is the file containing your affidavit and annexures. It will be to that file that I will refer in the course of your evidence. And where relevant, if at any point you need assistance with reference to a document, you can indicate that to me and I will assist you with that. But my proposal for receiving your evidence today is to really take you through the affidavit, but ask you to account the story as accurately as you can, and where relevant we can go into the documents. Mr. Ngwenya, if we can start with your background. You set that out. If we go to page 1 of the file, you'll see the pagination in the top right-hand corner of the pages. And you talk in paragraphs, 1 in particular, about your background within South African Express. Can you please tell the Chair what that comprises?
It talks to my position, Chair. I'm employed as the Divisional Manager, Security Management. I'm actually solely responsible for the security and investigation function within the entity.
Just raise your voice a little higher.
And Ms. Ngwenya, maybe bring that even
Yes,
closer if that would be of
yes,
assistance.
Yes.
Thank you.
I'm saying, Chair, I'm employed as the Divisional Manager, Security Management. I'm responsible for the overall security function and investigation within the entity. I actually joined SA Express in 2014 on the 6th of January as a security compliance officer, and I operated as that until April 2015 when I started acting as a security specialist / manager. I was on that position until April 2018 when I was appointed divisional manager, security management. And my appointment was dated back to February of that year. I still report to the ICO, Mrs. Caesar Mzimela, and yeah, that's basically it.
Thank you, Mr. Ngwenya. Just for record purposes, you have produced an affidavit for the Commission. Ordinarily, when witnesses prepare statements, we begin by asking them to confirm the correctness, but this is an affidavit, and in that case, you've already done so by deposing to it before a Commissioner of Oaths. I do, however, understand from you that there are 1 or 2 corrections you'd like to make in the affidavit, and my proposal is to deal with them when we get to them in the course of the evidence.
Okay.
Mr. Ngwenya, at page 2 of your affidavit, you talk about your reporting lines within SA Express. Can you please tell us about that?
You mean at the time, ma'am?
At the time,
Okay.
indeed.
During 2015, actually prior to the investigation, I was reporting to Mrs. Miriam Chwewumuchwili, who was the legal risk and compliance general manager.
Ms. Hofmeyer, I know that some evidence leaders help with the spelling of some of these names
Yes.
to assist the transcriber.
That may be
So
useful.
that might be useful, yeah.
Indeed. Just to give, it's Meriam, Merriam, and then the surname Moshwele is Mochoele. Thank you, Chair.
Yes.
Yes, she was the general manager, legal risk and compliance, which means the security management fell under her wing as well. She was also responsible for that. During the time when I started this investigation, in particular around June, there was somebody who was brought in, appointed as a divisional manager, safety and security, by the name of Miss Brenda Mlangeni. I think at the time when the investigation started, or when I started this investigation, I think she was about a month old within SA Express. Hence, in most of, or rather throughout, she's not even mentioned. Because when this whole thing, this investigation was, or rather the whistleblowing, when I was called, I did not even speak to her because of, truth of the matter is that the matter was, not to disrespect, but above her pay grade. So I had to bypass her and go back to Mrs. Muchwili and the CEO. In fact, what actually happened, Chair, that was the 24th of June 2016, the afternoon, just after 3. I received a call from a lady who claimed that she was from the Northwest, and she wanted to report corruption against one of the GMs within SA Express, whom at the time she alleged that this person was interfering with her company, and he wanted to actually take over the company. And she was prepared to go to media, in particular Mail and Guardian, to report this. I was really concerned, and I felt that, facts may be misconstrued somehow, and, I was concerned about the company's reputation, getting tainted. And I requested the lady to give me an opportunity to meet with her so I can understand exactly as to what was the issue all about.
Mr. Ngwenya, if I may just interject there,
Yes.
could you give us a clarity as to who the people are that you're referring to? So, who was the woman who contacted you on the 24th of June 2016?
Okay, it was Miss Babadi Tlatsana.
Just to interrupt there, I do apologize, but for the purposes of the record, that's B-A-B-A-D-I and Tlatsana is T-L-A-T-S-A-N-A. So she contacted you and she, as I have your evidence, wanted to report corruption related to somebody within SA Express. Who was that person that she identified?
Mr. Brian Tebogo van Wyk, who was the GM commercial at SA Express.
Thank you. And that is Brian, B-R-I-A-N, Tebogo, T-E-B-O-G-O, and Van Wyk, V-A-N-W-Y-K.
Yes. I therefore pleaded with her not to go on and requested that we meet. And the meeting took place the following day in Mafikeng Mall, where, on the very same Friday, we agreed that we would meet between 8 and 8:30. So the following day, which was a Saturday, I left my house very early, at approximately 4 o'clock a.m., and drove to the northwest to meet with this lady. Because of, on the day, she had gave me her description, to say she looks like this and she would be wearing 1, 2, 3. So I went to the northwest and I got there, and I must say that I was pushing to get there first so I can identify her as, she walked in. And indeed, it happened like that, because when I got there, she wasn't really there. And I saw her through the window as she was coming in. I suspected that it could be her. And when she walked in, she looked around, and I could, when our eyes met, we could see that it was her. And then she approached me, introduced herself to say, Miss Babadi Tlatsana, the owner or director of Koroneka Trading and Projects and Trading, something like that company, okay, which is the handling company for SA Express. And then I
Mr.
introduced.
Ngwenya,
Yes, ma'am.
if I could just interrupt there, sometimes you'll have a lot of background knowledge that we may not have,
Okay.
so do forgive me. But when you say she was, Koroneka was the handling company
Yes.
for SA Express, can you just explain to us what that means?
Okay, as an airline, when we fly to particular destinations, airports, we would have a company doing the ground handling for us, because of we're not doing the ground handling, only doing the air services, flying passengers and all that. Therefore, we would source, or rather outsource the function to specific companies that would provide, handling our passengers, the logistics on the ground. So in this instance, Koroneka was doing the check-in, which means they were processing passengers as they were checking in, loading baggage, and so forth, but the ground services. So this Koroneka was providing that service to SA Express, which means there was an agreement of some sort between SA Express and Koroneka for this specific service, where SA Express was expected, of course, to remunerate Koroneka for the services rendered to SA Express.
And Mr. Ngwenya, where were those services being provided, the ground handling services?
At that time, Koroneka was providing the services in 2 airports. One which was Pilanesberg, and the other one was Mafikeng Airport.
Both located in the northwest.
Both located in the northwest, yes.
So the handling part of the business refers to the checking in of passengers and what else?
It was the checking in, the baggage loading, the boarding of passengers. It's actually a process. It's a value chain of some sort.
Is it
Chair.
like taking the passenger from when he or she checks in up to
Yes,
where
up
he
to he
and
board the
she
aircraft, yes.
and the luggage gets put in the plane?
Absolutely.
Is it that process?
Absolutely, Chair.
Okay, all right,
Absolutely.
thank you.
And just for the record again, Koreneka, which is not an obvious word to spell, is Koreneka. So, Mr. Ngwenya, you identify Ms. Tlatsana on that Saturday morning, and she introduces herself, and then as I have your statement, we're now at page 3, at least your affidavit at page 3, you then go on to recount what Ms. Tlatsana told you in that meeting. And can you summarize for us what that was?
Okay, firstly, I had to probe her pertaining the allegation that she raised the previous day about Mr. Brian Van Wyk. Ms. Tlatsana told me that, like I said, that she was the owner, the sole owner of, she was the owner of Koreneka Trading and Projects, which was providing these ground handling services to SA Express. And then she informed me that she had the dealings with SA Express, in particular Mr. Van Wyk, because of she got through to Express via Mr. Van Wyk. What she explained to me was that initially, when this whole thing started about the project, there was a meeting somewhere in the Northwest where she gave a proposal to revive the air services, or rather the airports within the Northwest. You know, that she was interested in reviving that. And then at that time, I think there were talks between, according to her, Chair, there were talks between SA Express and the Northwest Department of Transport, you know, to have a deal to have SA Express, you know, flown into the area and all that. And she said somehow somebody referred her to Mr. Van Wyk to say she can speak to Mr. Van Wyk, who's the general manager of SA Express. And I must say that at the time, Mr. Van Wyk's department was spearheading the project, for this project in the Northwest. She said to me she provided the documents to Mr. Van Wyk, which means that was the company profile and the statutory document, you know, to provide that service, as it was the proposal. Then Mr. Brian Van Wyk, she said, took that stuff and later on confirmed to her that she stand a chance of getting, you know, the job, for a simple reason that she was a woman, number one, and she was from the very same area, which is Northwest, of which the government was actually interested in giving local people, empowering them, in fact. So Mr. Van Wyk told her that the only disadvantage was that she was the sole owner of the organization, of that company. And therefore, on those bases, that would limit her chances of being awarded the work. He then advised her to get somebody, you know, to be partnered with her. And she suggested at the time to Mr. Van Wyk that she would prefer to have her sister on board as a partner. Mr. Van Wyk told her that it cannot work because it would be seen as nepotism, you know, family members and all that. And Mr. Van Wyk suggested that he can bring two individuals that can actually assist her, as she did not have the experience, you know, pertaining to the service that she was to provide. He said he will bring two people that can actually create more opportunities for her going forward, and they would assist her with the management as they are knowledgeable, you know, in relation to what she was to provide, the service that she was to provide. And she agreed to that. And then later on, Mr. Van Wyk brought two individuals to this, to her, to say she needed to add these people as part of the owners of this organization. So the names that Mr. Van Wyk brought, I take it that also with their identities and everything else that needed to be done, was a Mr. Victor Tabing, who was supposed to be a partner, and a Mrs. Joyce Peary. And he brought the two, and they held about 66%, 33, whilst she was the majority shareholder of 34%. So that's how the Coroneka ownership was actually altered. Then they became part of Coroneka. She said that they provided services, of course, but the other thing that she mentioned to me was that she was not actively involved. I may have omitted this information, Chair, on my affidavit, I'm thinking, because there were quite a lot of things that were happening around that time. So she said she was not actively participating, and this could be supported by one of the audio recordings where they were sitting at, I think, at the Spare restaurant, where she mentioned that I'm not known as the owner of this organization. You're the only one, Mr. Van Wyk, that is known. But I'll deal with that as, you know, I continue leading with this, with this, going through my affidavit or my testimony. You know, as we're sitting there, she said to me there was plenty that she wanted to give me in terms of the evidence, you know, documentary evidence that relates to the whole thing, how it started, how they went on, and who was actually, you know, part of this entity. And she even went on to mention that, you know, for that matter, she did not even appoint a single person in her entity relating to this ground handling. Now, Mr. Chair, you know, we were at 3 places around that day because we had to move from Wimpy, where I was having breakfast when she arrived anyway. We had to move from there to her house. That's when I got to see her house. We fetched some documents and some audio recordings. It was quite a lot of stuff. We then went to her office where, you know, Coroneka was actually operating within Mafikeng CBD.
Mr. Ngwenya, if I may just come in there, before we get to your movements on the day,
Yes.
What I'd like to just conclude with is the full extent of the story that she told you about what had transpired after Coroneka was appointed to do this ground handling service at the 2 airports. But Chair, just for the record purposes, Mr. Ngwenya's evidence relays what Ms. Tlatsana told him, but Ms. Tlatsana will be giving evidence in due course, so there won't be a concern
That's
about
fine.
a hearsay aspect
Yes.
there.
Okay.
But if we can just go back, Mr. Ngwenya, if I can locate you at page 5 of
Page
your
5, okay.
affidavit, because you'll see at the first paragraph there, you cover the point you've already given in evidence about Mr. Van Wyk saying to her that she would not be successful in the conclusion of the contract unless she had more people in the company. And there he proposes Ms. Joyce Perry and Mr. Victor Tabeng. And if you then go to paragraph 15, you talk there about the conclusion of the agreement as she relayed it to you, and then the level of her involvement after that point in the ground handling services of the company. Could you deal with those 2 aspects?
Okay, thank you. Chair, from point 15 of this affidavit, she confirmed to me that she signed an agreement with SA Express that relates to the Pilanesberg and Mafikeng airports, and that Mr. Van Wyk did not give her a copy of the contract. She also said to me that in actual fact, the plan was that Mr. Van Wyk was supposed to help her until she find her footing to be able to manage that contract. However, after, you know, appointing the 2 directors, she claimed, or she told me that Mr. Van Wyk brought a person by the name of Mr. David Kalisilira, who was supposed to be the company's accountant, as they also had to agree that she would run with you know, the running of the finances, you know.
Mr. Ngwenya,
Yes.
in terms of other appointees,
Yes.
at paragraph 15, you talk about the appointment of Mr. Kalisilira, that's
Yes.
Kalisilira.
Yes.
There's another appointment that you refer to in paragraph 16, and that relates to Mr. Piri and what he was going to do, and Ms. Dube. Can you take us through what she recounted to you about those two people?
Okay, thanks. I was actually going there, ma'am. Chair, as I said, that she brought Mr. Kalisilira first as a financial, accountant. Then she brought also a person by the name of Mr. Levi Sipho Piri, who then appointed Ms. Notando Dube to run with the operation as a manager, Coroneka's manager, to run with the, administrative and operational side of things within Coroneka, while Ms. Tlatsana was not really involved. She was actually hands-off.
And Mr. Ngwenya, who did she relay to you appointed the ground handling staff?
She said that Mr. Sipho Piri was also involved in the appointment of the very same ground handling staff. That obviously, they've done the check-in and all the other functions, that are related to the contract.
And then if you turn over the page to page 6, you talk there, you inquired from her, as I have your affidavit, about the invoicing under the agreement and the extent of her involvement in that. Can you tell us what she relayed to you about that?
Can you repeat that, ma'am? And
Yes.
the paragraph that you're referring to? which one?
Paragraph 17.
Okay.
Where I'm picking it up is in the middle of that paragraph, where you say she further mentioned that she did not put any claims either to SA Express nor the department. I remember long after I'd met her, she asked me about the process of invoicing at SA Express.
Yes. As I was speaking to her, it became apparent to me that she didn't really know the content of the service level agreement, because as we were talking, she kept on referring to Mr. Van Wyk, telling him that this needed to be done and how and when, and that there's money that needs to be paid from that account. I mean, by Coroneka, as the facility manager. Maybe I need to clarify quickly this. We're talking about the tripartite relationship here, where there was the Northwest Department of Transport, there was SA Express, there was Coroneka. Now, Coroneka was the service provider to both entities. Coroneka was the facility manager for the Northwest government and was appointed for that specific function by SA Express on behalf of the Northwest government. I'm saying this just to clarify matters so we cannot confuse issues. On the other hand, Coroneka was providing the ground handling services for SA Express. SA Express appointed Coroneka to provide that service. Now, because of here, I'm talking about the CCTV, I'm talking about functions that had absolutely nothing to do with SA Express. That is the reason I'm giving this clarity. So you understand, Chair, as to where I'm coming from. Now, in this regard, I'm saying she did not understand the content of the contract. I would say both contracts, because she stated clearly to say Mr. Van Wyk did not give her any contract. She signed, but she did not receive the copies of the contract. And then she relied on him. In this regard, where I speak about the CCTV, I speak about anything that has to do with the airport refurbishment or whatsoever, had absolutely nothing to do with the SA Express service level agreement, but the Northwest. Now, she relied on Mr. Van Wyk, and she said to me, because of Mr. Chair, part of the bundle that she gave me, there were invoices, expense authorization, money, amounting to 51 million rands that was paid to Coroneka And on those invoices, she said she did not prepare even a single invoice, to claim the remuneration from either entity, of which with SA Express she never even submitted a single invoice at that particular time. Therefore, she said it clearly to me that she did not really submit anything, and though the money went into her account.
Thank you.
Yes.
Ms. Ngwenya, you, at paragraph 18, then relay how she explained to you that a conflict arose at a point in her engagements with Mr. Van Wyk. Can you take us through that conflict?
At some stage of this whole thing, as I've said, that Miss Dube was the managing Coroneka. Mr. Sana actually dismissed Miss Dube, as the manager for Coroneka. Maybe because of the differences, or she did not really report to her. She was, in fact, reporting to Mr. Van Wyk. He then dismissed her. And that started this whole friction between her and, Ms. Tlatsana and Mr. Van Wyk, where Mr. Van Wyk was not really happy about the dismissal of Ms. Dube. I would assume that because Ms. Dube was brought by Mr. Sipho Phiri, who was brought by Mr. Van Wyk. Hence, she was not really, perhaps, he was not really satisfied. And then he threatened Ms. Tlatsana to say he'll take the contract and give it to somebody else, as he was the one who actually brought this. And that, Mr. Chair, can be confirmed via either the audio recordings or the SMSs, exchange between Ms. Tlatsana and Mr. Brian Van Wyk. At that time, Mr. Brian Van Wyk was utilizing his own personal cell phone, and also whatever communication that was between them via email, it was not on SA Express, email account, but on his personal Gmail account. So strange that you run, company business, but you put in your own details.
When Ms. Tlatsana said to you she had not been active in this ground handling business of hers, what period was she talking about? Was it the period prior to her meeting with you, or was she saying even as at the time that she was meeting with you, she was still not active in the business?
It was actually,
as you understood her.
It was prior, because obviously, as she narrated the story, to say these were the issues, the conflicts that happened. It was actually prior our meeting.
So when you met, your
already,
understanding was that she was active in the business.
At that juncture, when we met, she took charge because she had fired Miss Nothando Dube, and I think at the time replaced her with somebody else, a Miss Penyo Lewis, something like that.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. No, that's fine.
And then, Mr. Ngwenya, at paragraphs 18 and 19, you, in a sense, jump forward and tell us what happened over time when steps were taken to replace Coroneka with other entities in relation to ground handling. Can you take us through that? And then we will go to the topic of the recordings that you've referred to at points in your testimony already. But just to complete the picture, at 18 I have it that she says a conflict develops between Mr. Van Wyk and herself after she dismisses Ms. Dube. And then if you can take us further in time from that in relation to the replacement of Coroneka.
Okay. Obviously, Chair, it's not obvious. Because of the conflict, Chair, between Mr. Van Wyk and Ms. Tlatsana, and threatening to take her out, I think Mr. Van Wyk took a drastic step to actually try and replace Coroneka. Now, Mr. Chair, I must bring this to your attention to say the contract that was signed, it was for a period of 5 years. Now Coronega was providing like two different kind of services to two different entities. However, Mr. Van Wyk decided to say no, he would terminate as promised. Then the Valotech came into picture. This Valotech, how it came into picture, Mr.
Before the Valotech, just remind me, what was Mr. Van Wyk's position at SA Express?
Mr. Van Wyk's position at SA Express was the general manager, commercial.
In Northwest?
No, SA Express. SA Express.
Nationally?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you. Yeah, you may proceed.
He was the head of
Yes.
the commercial department. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And then you made reference to Valotech. I understand that to be the name of a company. Is that correct?
It is the name of the company, ma'am.
The full name is reflected on one of the agreements attached to your affidavit. It's Valotech, and that's VALOTECK, Facilities Management CC. Is that correct?
Correct, ma'am. Correct.
So as I have your evidence, at some point, Coroneka is replaced by Valotech
Yes.
pursuant to a decision by Mr. Van Wyk. That's what's relayed to you. Is that correct?
Correct, ma'am.
And what happens thereafter? Is Valotech then thereafter replaced itself?
At the time, remember the contract between Coroneka and Express, as well as the Northwest, was actually still on. It was still effective. But because of this misunderstanding, Mr. Van Wyk wanted to take Coroneka out. He then appointed Valotech. And when Valotech came into the picture, they were supposed to take over from Coroneka. Because of at the time when she told me, she said, it was June, and she said Valotech was appointed effective May, I think the 1st of May. But when they were supposed to take over this Valotech, take over from Coroneka, at that time Coroneka, involved, their legal representation. That's Ms. Tlatsana who did exactly that. Because at that time, she was the sole owner of the organization. So she told me that she threatened SA Express with the lawyers to say, they would take SA Express on the basis that they were breaching the service level agreement. Yes.
Thank you. And then after Valotech, at paragraph 19, you talk about the fact that your later investigations indicated that Valotech had been paid an amount of 15 million by the department, but had rendered no services. Is that correct?
That is correct, ma'am.
And you conclude paragraph 19 by indicating what happened in the end to Valotech. What were you able to establish in relation to Valotech?
As I stated, that Valotech did not conduct any services either for ground handling or for facility management. However, I received information. I was told that the Northwest government paid, or the Department of Transport, the Northwest Department of Transport, paid an amount around the region of 15 million to Valotech, for providing the service that they did not really do. Valotech did not provide any service to SA Express. There's no record within SA Express that would indicate that Valotech provided the service. And as far as I know, they did not provide a service to the Northwest because of Coroneka hung on to the contract until such time they were taken out when MAMCO moved in, which is another company, not Valotech. But what I also established was that Valotech, after receiving the money, they liquidated. After receiving that 15 million.
What services did you understand Valotech to have been required to render in order to be entitled to this 15 million rand?
In actual fact, the very same services that were provided or rendered by Coroneka, as the contracts.
Yes.
It's a cut and paste from Coroneka to Valotech with different figures in terms of remuneration from the SA Express side.
But had the contract between SA Express and Coronega been terminated at the time that Valotech was
No,
given
Chair.
a contract?
No, hence I said that when I started the investigation, it was June, and the contract was still, ongoing, the Coronega one. Valotech was appointed effective May of the very same year. So Valotech did not really take over from Coronega. In actual fact, Ms. Tlatsana told me that Ms. Nothando Dube was spreading rumors that Coronega was to leave the airport and be replaced by Valotech. So Valotech was going to take over from Coronega, but that did not materialize.
Yes.
Because
but-
of Valotech, Coronega, hung on to the to this contract.
But
Mr.
you said you suggested that there was a contract between SA Express and Valotech, and you said it was a cut and paste of the contract between SA Express and Coronega. Is that what the position was?
Absolutely, Chair. At the time when I was actually investigating, I discovered that Valotech was appointed by SA Express through an RFQ process where 3 codes were requested from the market, for the provision, in fact, of labor broking, labor brokerage services. So that's how Valotech was brought into Express. And if my memory serves me well, Valotech was the only entity that responded to that request, which was sent out, for quotation. So the contract that was between SA Express at the time, within SA Express, the contract was not available. There was just an award letter, for Valotech to provide the labor brokerage services. The contract, let me put it this way, there was no signed contract
Yes.
at the time.
Yeah.
I did not see any signed contract between SA Express, and even during my investigation, when I went to different departments to try and establish as to whether we have a copy or not, I was actually told that we don't have a signed contract at the time.
That is between SA Express,
SA Express
and
and
Valotech.
Valotech, yes.
But what is the cut and paste that you were talking about? Cut and paste contract you were
okay.
talking about?
Maybe I'm too forward, Chair. But if you look at the Valotech contract, the actual contract, that
Which
was-
happened afterwards.
Indeed.
yes,
Okay, all right.
Yes.
Ms.
that was
Hofmeyer,
signed.
maybe continue.
Chair, if I may, just because one of the challenges with this part of the investigation is there are numerous companies that replace each other within a blink of an eye. What we will do is we will go through each of those agreements.
Yes,
But
okay.
what I understand of your evidence, Mr. Ngwenya, and Chair, I note that we are at the lunch break, but if we could just conclude on this point
Yeah.
before doing so. There are just 2 things I want to clarify. Mr. Ngwenya, I understand your evidence to be there was an agreement for ground handling services concluded between South African Express and Coronega, correct?
Correct.
That was in about April of 2015, correct?
Correct.
Subsequent to that, after there's this conflict that develops between Mr. Van Wyk and Ms. Tlatsana, a replica agreement is signed and concluded now between SA Express and this company called Valotech. Is that correct?
Correct.
Now let's just bring labor broking services in because it gets quite confusing. As I understand your evidence, in the course of your investigation, the only evidence you could find within SA Express of an actual award of any contract to Valotech at all related to some quotation that was sought for labor broking services. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And then my final point of clarification, you mentioned Ms. Dube in the context of Valotech, but we need to unpack that a little bit because we'd heard about Ms. Dube in Coronega. So I understand your evidence. It was when Ms. Tlatsana dismissed her from Coronega that the conflict between Mr. Van Wyk and Ms. Tlatsana arose, as she recounted it to you.
Absolutely.
So what happens to Ms. Dube? Where does she feature again?
Thank you. Ms. Dube was the owner of Valotech.
Of Valotech.
Thank you.
You know, I may have to go back and forth in relation to this. Like I said, that in actual fact, if you look at it, Chair, Ms. Dube was appointed as a manager, you know, for Coronega by somebody that was brought in by Mr. Brian van Wyk. Now, when Ms. Dube got fired by Ms. Tlatsana, you know, at Coronega, she started a company which was Valotech. Now, in this company, they were two. I think she was a 50% holder, you know, of the shareholding. And there was another person by the name of, I think, Kifilwe Mogodiri. This Kifilwe Mogodiri also held a 50% part of the shares. Now, that is why I'm saying there's a continuation with Ms. Dube. Now, Mr. van Wyk was not satisfied with the dismissal, and he appointed Valotech. Now, this element, Ms. Dube, you know, continued to be part of this whole thing. She was fired there, then Valotech surfaced, and Ms. Dube was actually the owner of that entity. To me, it was well orchestrated to say, you know what, we will continue where you left off. So they tried to take out Coronega by utilizing this Valotech, and it did not materialize.
Thank you, Mr. Ngwenya. Were you able to establish any relationship between Ms. Dube and Mr. van Wyk other than her appointment initially in Coronega?
Not really, ma'am, in that regard, because the only thing that I can say, I could see just, you know, Ms. Dube moving from one entity to the other up to, you know, your PAMCO. So I cannot really, I don't have anything tangible to say, you know, they had this relationship or whatsoever.
Indeed.
Yes.
Chair, just to assist those who are not as familiar with the facts as Mr. Ngwenya is, he's made reference to MAMCO and PAMCO. They are subsequent companies who receive the same ground handling services agreement, but we will come to them in the course of the evidence.
Okay. We'll take the lunch adjournment and we'll resume at 2:10. We adjourn.